Welcome back to another episode of the Educational AD Podcast. We'll be back with today's guest, but first let's hear from our podcast sponsors. We want to thank Violet Defense for their support of the Educational AD Podcast. Violet Defense is dedicated to protecting our world from germs by bringing the power of UV disinfection to everyday spaces. Their patented technology enables them to harness the power of the sun to incorporate ultraviolet light into products and environments like never before. Whether you're ready to implement existing products, or if you'd like to explore researching and developing a custom deployment of their technology for your school, Violet Defense has the solutions and the experience you need. Thanks again to Violet Defense, and go to violetdefense.com for more information about their great products. We also want to thank Sideline Interactive for their support. You know, it's becoming harder and harder to fund an athletic department, but Sideline Interactive's indoor scoring tables and video boards can generate $10,000 or more every year, while also creating excitement in the gym and the ultimate game day experience for your student athletes. Go to sidelineinteractive.com or call them at 832-786-0302 to schedule a live web demo and see their tables and boards in action. You can also email them at sales@sidelineinteractive.com for more information. That's sales@sidelineinteractive.com. We've got a Sideline Interactive video score table in our gym, and it is fantastic. You really need to check these folks out. We also want to thank Wall of Fame by Vital Signs. You know, they are on a mission to bring your school's legacy to life. They provide a variety of interactive touchscreen video options and an extensive library of templates to make it easier than ever to recognize the athletic achievements of your students, both past and present. For more ideas on how to showcase your school's diverse history, along with your proudest moments, go to vitalsignswalloffame.com. Or learn more and get started with your own digital Wall of Fame tribute. Give them a call at 614-981-3589 or email them at sales@vitalsignswalloffame.com. That's sales@vitalsignswalloffame.com. We also want to thank Huddle. Remember, at Huddle, we power sports. Over 180,000 teams, including some of the best in the world, are using Huddle to elevate the play of their teams and their athletes using video and analytics. Huddle's the complete performance platform. They have online tools, mobile and desktop apps, smart cameras like the Huddle Focus. Of course, there's analytics and a whole lot more. Huddle's also built for every level of play. If you're a club or a youth coach, Huddle can help you. High schools and colleges have been using Huddle for years, and even professional teams are using Huddle to raise the level of play of their teams and athletes. You're in pretty good company with over 6 million users, including your student athletes, a lot of their parents, and the coaches of the teams you're trying to get your kids recruited to. If you want to find out more about what Huddle can do for you, or how your school can become a Huddle school, go to huddle.com and talk to their professionals. Remember, at Huddle, we power sports. And we also want to thank Athletic Surveys by Lifetrack for sponsoring the Athletic Director's Toolbox segment of our podcast. Athletic Surveys by Lifetrack are a quick, easy, and affordable way for you to collect comprehensive data that allows you to evaluate and improve your entire athletic department. Athletic Surveys by Lifetrack also puts you in touch with the 95% of the parents and the players that really love your program, and it gives them a voice to help demonstrate the importance that a positive athletic experience has for them. Go to Athletic Surveys by Lifetrack and check out their testimonials, and then give them a call at 1-800-738-6466, or you can email them at info@athleticsurveys.com to get started. If you've never used a survey to check the pulse of your parents or your student athletes, you're really missing out on some important information. Talk to the pros at Athletic Surveys by Lifetrack and let them help you take your athletic program from good to great. And we want to thank our good friends at Hometown Ticketing, the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. You can learn more about what Hometown Ticketing can do for you by talking to the professionals at hometownticketing.com. Hometown ticketing, simple and easy online ticketing. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Educational AD Podcast. We've got a really cool guest today, Mary Struckhoff. Mary is currently a consultant in the area of athletics and particularly officiating, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. She's got a tremendous background. She was a college athletic director. She was the national coordinator for the NCAA women's basketball officiating program. She was also an assistant director for the National Federation of High Schools, the NFHS, and a lot of other things. We're going to let her talk about all of those, but Mary, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Jake. Appreciate it.
I connected with Mary when she presented as part of Jen Brooks's Global Community of Women in High School Sports. Was really impressed by what she had to share and thought it would be of great value to our listeners. So we're going to jump right in. Mary, we always like to let our listeners have a chance to get to know our guests. So
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where'd you grow up?
A little bit about me.
And how you got to this point. Yeah.
Very good. I'm from a large family. I'm one of nine, originally from the St. Louis area, St. Louis, Missouri, where I was born and raised, and was involved in athletics from an early age, played softball and tennis, and actually played tennis in high school and softball and tennis in college. Went to a small school in Kansas. Was the first one of those 9 kids to graduate from college, first generation college graduate, which I'm very proud of. Went to school in Kansas, went back to Missouri, went back to St. Louis, and became a high school coach, athletic administrator, and department chair very early in my career. Again, very blessed to do that. Yeah, I really enjoyed that. Did that for about 7 years, decided it was in time for me to go back to school, get my master's degree in athletic administration, to give me some more opportunities. And actually did go back to the high school level, but eventually ended up on the collegiate level in the Chicago area, and then again in the Lexington, Kentucky area. There's some stories behind a lot of these things, but I was, after teaching in the Chicago area, I applied for a job with the Illinois High School Association, which was located in, it still is, Bloomington, Illinois, Bloomington Normal area, and stayed there for only 3 years. And the reason is I was approached to actually apply for a job with the National High School Federation. So became an assistant executive director with the NFHS in Indianapolis. And really that whole time, from the time I was teaching high school and athletic administrator there in 1987, I started to officiate. I started on the high school level, started with high school basketball, and continued to kind of work my way up. And by the time I went to Indianapolis with the NFHS and still with the Illinois High School Association, I was working college. I was working Division I women's basketball for the NCAA, and primarily in the Big Ten, since I was a Midwesterner. And got to do both a really cool full-time job with the NFHS, but also kind of a side gig as a collegiate referee. So that was a lot of fun. Did that, refereed till 2006. And the NCAA hired me to be the national coordinator of women's basketball officials. So I was, really kind of responsible for the national program for women's basketball, but primarily worked with the Division I committee in assigning the national tournament. I did both of those jobs, which really were 2 full-time jobs, which all athletic administrators do. We know that there's at least 2 full-time jobs in there. But I did those 2 jobs until 2011, decided it was time to do something a little different, moved to Kentucky and opened a business. So that was a crazy thing. Anyway, I'm now semi-retired and I don't like to use that word too much, retired, because I'm anything but, really. But I'm in the St. Petersburg, Florida area. I'm working as a consultant, as you mentioned, with the Pictor Group, and working primarily on an officiating project for the NCAA, specifically the Division III Commissioners Association. So that's been taking up a lot of my time.
Yeah, talking about that semi-retired, I had someone say, Jake, I thought you were retired. You're so busy. And I said, yeah, but it's my busy. Okay.
Right.
You're choosing the things you're doing. We're going to talk about the officiating component in a bit, but can you share a little bit about going to work for the National Federation? I think the
Sure.
rank and file coaches and ADs that just haven't had a chance to experience, let's say, the NIAAA or the
Right.
NFHS in action, they just think it's this big ivory tower in Missouri and Indianapolis that, talk
Right.
about how that, I guess maybe your first experience with them, and then how
Sure.
it works and why it's so important to our profession.
Oh, excellent. Actually, it's some of my fondest memories, actually. So as I mentioned, I went from a high school athletic administrator and again was fortunate enough to get a job with the Illinois High School Association. And all of the different state high school associations belong to the National Federation, the national office in Indianapolis. And so there's 50, actually 51, including the District of Columbia state high school associations that belong to the National Federation. And each state high school association kind of does their own thing with state tournaments. They do eligibility rules for participation in athletics or activities. But the national office lets the state do those kinds of things. The national office primarily is responsible for the playing rules for each of the different sports that the high schools are playing. I was, again, fortunate to be responsible for the playing rules, the high school playing rules for girls and boys basketball, and primarily because of my background in officiating, and girls softball. And so those two activities, those two rules codes were my responsibility with a committee. And we had an annual process that we went through, with the culmination being the publication of the rules book, which every athletic director has those rule books. Every coach has those rule books in high school, and hopefully they read them and open them. But we go through a process each year to revise those, to update them, to make some editorial changes, whatever that might be. I also was responsible for the National Federation Officials Association, again, because of my background with officiating. And so each state association, not all of them, but many of them license or register the officials in their state. And many of those states actually then push that membership up to the National Federation, which supplies insurance, basic insurance for those officials, basic liability insurance, and also, again, have some other benefits of membership for that. But primarily all that works through the State High School Association. But we licensed and registered at the national level almost over 100,000 officials throughout the 51 different state associations. So it was a nice big group of folks. But yeah, most of those rules and regulations come at the state level. So basketball, softball, primary responsibilities. I also, again, was fortunate enough to work with the NIAAA. We helped the National Federation staff actually help to put on that NIAAA conference each year in December. We would help with getting speakers and making sure the sessions were, staffed, and all the AV equipment were in place, all those types of things. So we actually worked very closely, the NFHS staff with the NIAAA staff, and helping them meet their goals and objectives.
Yeah, anyone that's ever been to one of the national conferences, they very much can see that NFHS presence there.
And it's one of the biggest conferences that the federation's involved in, obviously, but that National ADs conference is very popular with the high school athletic administrators, and understandably so.
And it's going to be coming to your neighborhood there in Tampa, and I think it's 2025. So.
You have to plan those so far in advance, because again, it's such a big conference that, again, they know those well in advance, just to be able to secure convention space and hotel space, because again, it's such a big deal. Yeah.
And as you said, they're just great conferences. For our listeners, we're visiting with Mary Struckhoff. She's a consultant focusing primarily on officiating, but she's done a lot of other things in the world of athletics. We're going to take a quick break, hear from one of our sponsors, but please stay with us. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We want to thank our good friends at Huddle for their support of the Educational AD Podcast. Remember, at Huddle, we power sports. More than 180,000 teams, including some of the best in the world, use Huddle to help their athletes and their teams perform better. Huddle's the complete performance platform. They have online tools, mobile and desktop apps, smart cameras like the Huddle Focus. Of course, there's analytics and a whole lot more. Huddle's built for every level of play, from the club and youth levels all the way through high school and college programs, and even professional teams are using Huddle to help their athletes play better. You're in pretty good company with over 6 million users, including your student athletes, a lot of their parents, and the coaches of the college and university teams that you're trying to get to recruit your kids. If you want to find out more about what Huddle can do for you and how your school can become a Huddle school, go to huddle.com and talk to their professionals. Remember, at Huddle, we power sports. We're back with Mary Struckhoff. Mary, at this point in the podcast, we always ask our guests about the mentors that they've had in their lives. None of us get to where we're at on our own. So who are some of the folks that have helped you along the way?
Wow. I've had such a variety of experiences. That means I've had a whole lot of mentors too. But, I'd have to say it started with my high school coaches and teachers there. They kind of instilled in me some really important values and kind of recognized the leader in me and helped me to flourish in that respect. So, Mrs. Ryan and Marion Haberstroh, those were great mentors for me and coaches. In college, same thing. Sharon Mathis was my tennis coach in college, and boy, what a tremendous influence she had on me, just in terms of doing the right things even at the wrong time. So it just really paved the way for me, especially in my teaching career and in my officiating career, all of those things. But I would have to say too, a guy named Jack Fisher in St. Louis. He was one of the dads of one of our players, basketball players, but he was instrumental and really changed the course of my life by getting me involved in officiating. I was watching one of our teams play, our girls team play basketball, and I was lamenting how terrible the officials were. And he was sitting next to me and he said, "Well, do you think you could do better?" And I, of course, said, "Well, sure." So he got me involved. I mean, he told me how to get my license from the Missouri High School Association. Being an AD, I didn't have any trouble getting games because I knew other ADs and they were hiring officials. And so it just helped me take my officiating career kind of took off, and I owe it all to Jack and really everything I accomplished after that. I've also had the opportunity to work in leadership camp kind of settings, and had some tremendous mentors there. But one of the most recent, I would say, is Holly Shealy, Dr. Holly Shealy. She's the athletic administrator, vice president of Transylvania University. Go Bats. And she taught me a whole lot of things about running a department and having an atmosphere of saying yes, doing anything you can to say yes to your coaches and student athletes, obviously within reason. But just creating that atmosphere, and coaches and student athletes thriving because of that.
I just always love to hear the stories. You can just feel the love and respect that are there for those mentors. The last time I heard you speak, you really went into great detail about, some of the things that you've been involved with, particularly with, women's and college officiating. So what can you share with our listeners, some of the results of the research that you've done regarding officials and officiating?
Sure. Well, it's no surprise to high school athletic administrators that we have a shortage of officials. And frankly, we have for a while. It's just now reaching crisis proportions, really. If you think about the why, it's not as simple as people would like to make them think. But, we sometimes think if we just put more money towards something, it's going to solve the problem. And what we've learned is that is completely not true. As I mentioned, I'm working with the Pictor Group on an extensive officiating research project. that was commissioned by the Division III Commissioners Association through the NCAA. And then the other two divisions kind of got on board from the NCAA, but really it was driven from the collegiate level. And Division III is feeling the crunch, just like high school is. So they asked to do a major research project and come up with some strategic initiatives to try to combat the problem. But, again, what we found through all the data we sent out, tens of thousands of surveys to collegiate officials. We surveyed commissioners from conferences. We surveyed coaches, collegiate coordinators of officials. And so we just got so many points of data, almost too much just to be able to analyze it all. But what we found was, sure, officials are grossly underpaid, but there's so much else involved in recruiting officials, retaining officials, and why young people are not getting into officiating. And so again, there's just a myriad of things to talk about, but I'll focus on just a couple. The shortage is involved because, again, young people aren't filling the pipeline of officials coming in from the most collegiate officials started their careers at the youth and high school level. And again, people are not filling the pipeline at the youth and high school level any longer. It used to be way back in the day, people like me who are educators had the time, they'd get off of school and, they'd have time to go officiate some high school contest. High school educators do not want anything to do with officiating any longer. And even young people who played the games are not interested in that because of the experience. They tell us the experience they had from their parents and their coaches yelling at officials. They say, I don't want anything to do with that. So that's, it's just kind of combating that perception that all they do is get yelled at. There's obviously more to it than that, as you well know, Jake. But so anyway, the research basically tells us it's important to change the culture between coaches and officials and have some mutual respect there. And we know some sports are much better at that than others. And also to educate our fan base, educate our parents to make sure that they understand that these people are human. They're going to make mistakes. They're expected to make decisions in real time. And many high school games, obviously most are not filmed, but guess what? Mom and dad have a camera that they're filming these games with, and they want to hold these officials to perfection and the scrutiny that this piece of video says that they're wrong. So it's just a different day today than it was when I got involved in 1987. And again, the scrutiny involved is just tremendous. Even going on campuses, whether it's college or high school campuses, how we treat officials. Many times they don't get towels or water or have a locker room, and it's the experience is such that they're thinking, why am I doing this? Why am I spending time away from my family? Why am I spending time away from my job, my real job, my career? Because people don't even appreciate the fact that I'm here and I'm trying to contribute to this experience for young people and contribute to my community. So we just need to do a little bit better job of respecting the humanity that's involved in this and understanding that officials are going to make mistakes. None of them like to, that's for sure. But the reality is they're human and they're going to make mistakes. So again, just changing the culture. The NCAA researched 25 different sports. And again, some sports are more in dire situations than others, but every single one of them is experiencing a shortage. And what we found as well is that some Division III contests are being canceled because there aren't enough officials on certain days of the week or even in a certain community to be able to hold those contests. And I'm sure, even though we didn't research the high school level, I'm sure if there's cancellations at the high school level as well for the same reasons. And so trick is get people back into it, change the culture a little bit, look at how we're recruiting and retaining officials, how we're educating them. And again, hopefully their experiences will be a little bit better. We'll be able to fill the pipeline. Division I NCAA is not having the problem that high school and Division III are, but they will if we don't continue to start filling that pipeline.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And again, listeners that have heard me say I'm a high school basketball referee, also officiate track, cross country, and I'm 64 years old, and in one of my associations down here in Southwest Florida, there's been more than one occasion on a 3-person crew where I've been the youngest guy on the crew. And so you're absolutely right. We need to get that next generation of officials to sign up. We're going to take a break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about some best practices as far as state associations, recruiting officials, and also for all you high school ADs that are listening, best practices on how to welcome and treat and support officials when they come to your school. So stick with us. We're visiting with Mary Struckhoff, consultant in a number of areas for athletics, but particularly in officiating. Please stay with us. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We also want to thank Sideline Interactive for their support. Sideline Interactive's indoor scoring tables and video boards help you fund your athletic department. They can generate over $10,000 every single year while also creating excitement in the gym and the ultimate game day experience for your student athletes. Go to sidelineinteractive.com or give them a call at 832-786-0302 to schedule a live web demo and see their tables and boards in action. You can also email them at sales@sidelineinteractive.com for more information. That's sales@sidelineinteractive.com. You really need to check them out. I promise you, you will come away very impressed. Hey, we're back with Mary Struckhoff, consultant in athletics, and in particular in officiating. Mary, this is the part of the podcast where we talk about best practices. And I'm going to ask you to kind of look at 2 categories. What are some best practices for state associations as far as recruiting officials? And what are some best practices for athletic directors on how they can do a better job of having a professional, positive relationship with the officials that come to their school?
Right. Great questions and pretty complex answers. First, the state associations really are well aware. In my conversations with the national office and different state high school administrators, they're very well aware because, again, their athletic administrators throughout the state are telling them, we're having to cancel contests, we don't have enough bodies, whatever the situation might be. So they're attempting to make a difference. And so there's actually a national, through the National Federation of State High School Associations, there's a national website we're trying to direct all individuals who might be interested in officiating to, and it's highschoolofficials.com. And it'll kind of walk you through the process, and it'll actually send you to the state in which you reside or want to officiate, and answer all those questions for you. But again, the state associations are trying to do they're working through also their local associations. Again, every state has locals and communities surrounding them that are trying to do the same thing and recruit. One of the thing though, it's the higher up the chain you go, the state association and the national association, it's hard to recruit. A good friend of mine from the Ohio Association used to say, recruiting officials is like recruiting people to go to your church. You're not going to get that from a national level. It's going to take a conversation. It's going to take sharing experiences and just encouraging, like Jack Fisher did for me, getting that person who's showing an interest, getting them involved, giving them the number, telling them how to get a uniform, whatever it might be. So yeah, there's definitely national and state associations that want to make a difference, but those conversations have to happen at the local levels. And so you mentioned the state high school athletic administrators. There's a lot of things that can be done. First of all, get the entire athletic department involved in recruiting. And I know that sounds like a big job, but again, it's about conversations. It's about conversations with student athletes. Because you can see, most of us can see those kids that would have some success in officiating, the point guards, the catchers, whoever it might be, even the kids that sit the bench, you don't get to play a lot. Those kids, you can tell just by how they're watching the game and their involvement in it, that they might be good officials. And so just encouraging that having them referee scrimmages or whatever it might be. I know there's a lot of high school kids that are actually officiating youth level, but coaches need to be encouraging that. Parent group, actually, you might be surprised, but parent groups, actually, you can talk to them about officiating, because a lot of times parents don't know what to do when their kids are done playing. They want to stay involved, especially swim parents, track and field parents. They want to be able to be involved because now they don't know what to do with their Saturdays and Sundays anymore. But anytime, and community members, a lot of schools actually host events for their communities surrounding athletics. That's a great time to recruit community members and tell them what a terrible situation this is in terms of recruiting and bodies and needing more officials in the community, and what a community service that might be. Sometimes people want to do the right thing and they want to be service oriented, but they just don't know what to do. And if they can be around sports and talk sports, they would love to do that and just don't even think that's a possibility. A lot of schools can actually host clinics for their local associations. That's one thing they can do to get have that officiating presence there beyond just the contest. So hosting local associations, and I've actually been invited to come and talk to parent groups, the booster club, whoever it might be, get officials in front of your parents to, again, humanize that avocation. So they know this is a real person with a real family, and they have jobs, and they have a life beyond officiating, and they're doing it for fun in many cases. So just trying to get parent groups to understand that as well. And we know this to be true, Jake, but that culture and that environment of that athletic department is probably the most important thing surrounding recruiting and retaining officials. We want our coaches to coach, we want our officials to officiate, and we want our kids to play and have fun. And so when we're trying to do the other jobs of those other groups, that's when chaos ensues. And so we want that head coach and those spectators to be mindful of their sporting behavior and behaving in appropriate ways so that the officials can do their job and hopefully minimize mistakes. We know that they're going to happen, as I mentioned, but we want folks to know they're human and those things are going to happen, and just let's move on. Let's move on from that mistake and put the ball in play or run the next play or whatever it might be. The other thing I talk about a little bit is be hospitable. When I was an athletic director, I wanted officials to want to come to my place. I wanted them to have a great experience. Not that I thought it was we were gonna get calls because of that, but happy officials have great games. And so, I know there were certain places I like to go as an official, some places I dreaded because I knew I was going to be given a technical within the first 10 minutes or first 5 minutes of the game. But, just we want to treat them like a third team, just like we host an opposing team coming in. We want to host the officials team coming in the same way. Water, towels, locker room if possible, just things we would provide the opponents coming to visit our place. We want to provide that same kind of experience for them. I think I'm getting most of these, but anything you can do as an athletic administrator that can positively influence the avocation. And again, hold your officiating coordinators or assigners accountable. I hate to say it, but there's some terrible assigners out there. They're in it for themselves and how much they can make. And it's almost extortion, unfortunately, but there's some great ones too. So don't get me wrong. The bad ones are an anomaly. But if coaches and high school athletic administrators are aware of what the process is for getting assignments, what kind of rules or standard procedures or best practices are surrounding those assignments, the more people pay attention, the better things are going to be, rest assured. And again, we talked a little bit about money, but hopefully athletic administrators and coaches are evaluating their fees, just like putting on the program. Some inflation happens. People need a little bump up here and there. And, we want to put on a first-class program, and having a first-class program means paying parts of the budget that have to be there. And the officials are part of that. The other thing I like to tell athletic administrators is to be willing to help the officials who want to advance. Just like coaches sometimes want to advance, they may want to go to the NCAA level. Who knows? They may want to do something different. Officials, they're the same way. We don't want to keep them stagnant. So if coaches are filling out evaluations, and again, if they're involved in they know how the coordinators and assigners are doing their business. If Mary Struckhoff wants to go to the collegiate level, let's celebrate that. Let's see if there's anything we can do to help with that. As long as we're doing our job and filling the pipeline underneath, we're going to have enough, and there's enough advancement opportunities for everybody.
Now, great advice. And I'm so glad you mentioned about athletic directors, make it a welcoming environment, not so much because you're trying to get calls.
Right.
However, as you know, as an official, as do I, there's 100 or more 50-50 calls over the course of a game, just because that official is human. If you manage to nudge that to 51-49, that's a good thing. Again, that's not why you're doing it, but if it's a nice byproduct, hey, why not? Okay. We're going to do this at the end of the podcast, but Mary, if one of our listeners wanted to reach out and pick your brain a little bit, what's the best way that they can get in touch with you? Can they email you?
Sure. My email address is my first initial last name. So M Struckhoff, Struckhoff 33@gmail.com. But yeah, I'm happy to take any questions or any ideas even as we work through this project and try to increase the number of officials. I'm happy to respond and do, or even to, any opportunities like this. I'm happy to get in front of anybody I can to promote the avocation of officiating. I'm in the St. Petersburg area, so again, anything close. I do actually get down to Venice once in a while, but yeah, this is anybody is welcome to contact me.
All right, Mary Struckhoff, we're going to be back for some more. Please stay with us. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We also want to thank Wall of Fame by Vital Signs for their support. Vital Signs is on a mission to bring your school's legacy to life. They provide a variety of interactive touchscreen video consoles and an extensive library of templates to make it easier than ever to recognize the athletic achievements of your students, both past and present. Go to vitalsignswalloffame.com for more ideas on how to showcase your school's diverse history and your proudest moments. If you want to learn more and get started with your own digital Wall of Fame tribute, you can also call them at 614-981-3589 or email them at sales@vitalsignswalloffame.com. That's sales@vitalsignswalloffame.com. We're back with our interview with Mary Struckhoff, athletic consultant, officiating expert. And Mary, we talk a lot on the podcast about this idea of social emotional health and coaching kids to be tough. You've certainly done a lot of work with student athletes, mostly at the college level, but some with high school. And as I said, social emotional health is such an important topic these days. Do you have any advice for our listeners who are primarily ADs and coaches? How can they do a better job in this area?
The social health, in my experience, getting kids involved with something bigger than themselves. And sometimes that involves giving back to their community, volunteer work, coaching younger kids than themselves, whatever it might be, but just that sense of giving back. And you can't instill that in young people at too young of an age. I think the sooner they learn that, they're much happier young people and much happier adults in giving back. I think that the mental health, unfortunately, there's so many, there's a lot of positives with student athletes, and certainly there's some negatives. From my experience, I think sometimes promoting empathy, and that kind of goes hand in hand with social issues and giving back. But the more we can develop empathy, especially for opponents, where our lives are going to be much richer and fuller. it's interesting. We want to instill that sense of competition, and we have the enemy, and it's a battle, and it's a war. And, I taught at Catholic schools, and I always remember my teams wanting to pray before every contest, which I encourage certainly, but they wanted to pray to win. And so I always thought that was too ironic. I mean, if we're going to win, that means they're going to lose. You're praying for them to lose. It seems like something wrong with that. But anyway, that's just me. But I think if we can have empathy and know that we're just trying to do our best, and we want to compete against ourselves and certainly against the other team, but that, we can want good things for our opponents as well. I think the other thing for mental health, and again, what I've seen with young people, and it starts well before the college experience, probably before the high school experience, is a sense of independence and being able to handle things without your parents intervening on everything that can go wrong. I know high school administrators, I, as a college administrator, had to deal with parents wanting to solve every single problem this child had, whether it was playing time or paperwork or travel or whatever it was. And we wanted just to deal with the student athletes. They're young adults. They can handle these types of things. But anything we can do to promote the independence in these young people to make some age appropriate decisions for themselves, it sets them up to know how to cope later in life when things don't necessarily go their way.
Yeah, you really touched on such a key item, and sports used to, I think, be that one of the primary vehicles, whether you made the team or not, whether you played a lot or you didn't, whether the team won or lost, you learned those defeats in a safe place. And, you don't make the team. Well, hey, I'm going to try another team. And
Right.
You're right. It's just, we're going to get on a whole different tangent here.
For
But
sure.
giving kids those opportunities, where they can learn how to, develop those resiliency skills. So critical. Great advice. Okay. Mary, this has been really cool having a longer talk with you. I really enjoyed the last time I heard you speak. And it's been nice, giving you a chance to talk here today, but we're not done yet. We always like to wrap up with what we call the Athletic Director's Toolbox, which is sponsored by Athletic Surveys. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to find out what's going to go in Mary Struckhoff's Athletic Director Toolbox. Please stay with us. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We want to thank Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack for their support of the podcast and for sponsoring the Athletic Director Toolbox segment. Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack are a quick, easy, and affordable way for you to collect comprehensive data that allows you to evaluate and improve your entire athletic program. Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack also puts you in touch with usually 95% of the parents and the student athletes who really love your program. And it gives them a voice to help demonstrate the importance that a positive athletic experience has for them. Go to Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack and check out their testimonials, and then give them a call at 1-800-738-6466, or you can email them at info@athleticsurveys.com to get started. If you've never used a survey to check the pulse of your parents or your student athletes, you're really missing out. Talk to the pros at Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack and let them help you take your athletic program from good to great. All right, we're back with Mary Struckhoff, athletic consultant, officiating expert, and longtime athletic director. Mary, now's the time where I'm going to challenge you to send out a brand new athletic director on their very first job. But I'm only going to let you put 3 things in their toolbox. What 3 items are going to go in Mary Struckhoff's toolbox, which again is sponsored by the Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack program. What do you got for us?
Wow. I think the first would be knowing what exactly is expected of you from the people that hired you. Answer this question for me. I will know I was successful in a year if I do X. And so if your administrators can tell you what that is, then you have your marching orders basically to do exactly what those folks wanted you to do. Sometimes there's hidden agendas. We got to cut through those. I think the second thing would be to do an immediate, we call it a SWOT analysis of your personnel. Find out from your coaches exactly the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats within the department. Have a one-on-one with everybody to find out how they tick, what's important to them. So again, you know the pulse of your department. And I think the third thing would be in hiring practices. Too often we want to hire people that look just like us or have same philosophies or whatever it might be. And think about your student athletes. We want to hire people that might look like them and have those experiences so that our student athletes know they can do those same types of things. So let's just keeping an open mind when we're hiring, I think would be the third thing.
Okay. Again, very cool tools. I love the SWOT. I don't think we've had that one yet, but it's so important. Again, Mary, if one of our listeners wanted to reach out and pick your brain a little bit, how can they get a hold of you?
A couple of ways, actually. My email address, mstruckhoff, MSTRUCKHOFF 33@gmail.com. And I'm also on LinkedIn. I can be reached through LinkedIn, again, at Mary Struckhoff, and happy to speak with anyone regarding any of these types of things. Actually, I'm doing a little, besides this officiating consulting gig, I'm doing a little coaching of coaches and coordinators and assigners and different folks just to kind of go through some of these things. So I'm open to possibilities and opportunities.
All right. Mary Struckhoff, thank you so much for sharing today on the Educational AD podcast, and all the best moving forward with your many projects.
Thank you so much, Jake. It's been a real pleasure. Really appreciate it.
For our listeners, remember the Zoom recordings of these interviews are uploaded to the Educational AD podcast YouTube channel. We appreciate you listening today. Come back again next time for another episode of the Educational AD. And again, thanks to our good friends, Hometown Ticketing, the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. You can learn more about what Hometown Ticketing can do for your program by going to hometownticketing.com. Hometown Ticketing, simple and easy online ticketing.